Let's talk about PlayStation VR2. I wanted to do something different over here. So I had one pre-ordered, even if I was a little skeptical of paying $600, considering the launch lineup and stuff. I talk about all that stuff and the criticisms I have in the game ranks before you buy. The overall hardware review, the hardware of the PlayStation VR2, I think it's great. I think it's really good VR for people to get into. The tech is there, the tracking, the optics, everything is really good. It's just a good VR experience. But what I wanted to do here was actually take a minute and talk about some damn VR games, because I really like VR. I just don't talk about it too much online because, frankly, not a lot of people click on it. But every once in a while, and especially with this channel, I like to just talk about what I like to talk about. And I've been experimenting and hopping into a bunch of games, specifically on PlayStation VR 2, and I have a lot to say. I'm itching to talk about VR because I don't in videos, and also maybe just take this if you are somebody that did buy a PlayStation VR 2, for some brief recommendations. Some of it is like the obvious stuff that you would expect to jump into, but I still just have some stuff to say. So let's talk about first Horizon Call of the Mountain. This is kind of like the big one. This is the one that they bundle it with if you want to pay up for that bundle. It's the Horizon spin-off VR game. And I'm always skeptical of these because they always kind of feel very much like just kind of like a quick little demo-y thing to show off the hardware that they whip up real quick. But Call of the Mountain has a surprising amount of care to it. Everything about it is pretty simple, and it still does feel like it can sometimes be like baby's first VR game, but on the other hand, like, to contradict myself a little bit, it's got a lot of serious game mechanics to it, and it's a pretty well-paced and like not super short adventure. Now, that length is a big thing with VR because it's like, how much time can you really spend in VR in a shot, right? So in my opinion, it makes games longer. For me specifically, I remember loving and playing Half-Life Alyx, and when I looked at my total playtime, it felt like it was way much longer because I was doing it in kind of hour-long spurts here and there. So I kind of felt that way with Call of the Mountain. And what it essentially is you are a guy. You are this Karja who is thrust into the world of Horizon. You're captured. You're kind of set on a task. There's this whole drama with you in the world, but also your brother. The main character is kind of whatever. He also sounds almost exactly like Nicolas Cage. It's really, really weird. It's a very interesting choice of voice acting, but I'm here for it.
With a pardon, I'd be free. But what does that even mean when everyone thinks you're a traitor?
And it's a mix of kind of like a fairly simple but, interesting enough VR adventure, first-person adventure quest type of thing, mixed with The Climb VR. Now, there's two The Climb games. They were made by Crytek and Oculus back when it was like the Oculus Rift when that first launched, and it's just around really good climbing mechanics, very convincing ways of pulling yourself up things. It's fairly simple. It's not very hard to just do it. You're not going to fall very often. It gets a little complicated here and there, but mostly it's just about the enjoyment of it. Because, if you think about it, as Aloy in the world of Horizon, you were doing a lot of climbing. So that's what you're doing here, but you're doing it in first person, and it feels a lot of fun. It feels very, intensive. The game also starts to give you little tricks and tools to improve your climbing, and they're a lot of fun, like a climbing axe and like a rope and stuff like that. And that kind of ties in with how interesting I think they actually made it feel kind of like a video game, man, where you have your bow, you can craft different types of arrows for those bows, and you have to actually put on like the end of the bow, the tip, and everything like that. You're opening things, you're opening crates in the environment and collecting kind of crafting materials and scrap, which is pretty cool. When you need health, your health is actually tracked on your glove. When you need health, you can pick up an apple and munch on it. And I like intuitive little things like that. We've seen it before in some VR, but I just like the way they did a lot of that stuff here. It feels like a straight up game. And the combat is pretty decent. It's very simple. It's very forgiving, but drawing an arrow and shooting it is pretty satisfying. And you're actually scanning the machines and looking for weak points and parts to shoot off of them, which is pretty cool. There's a pretty simple dodge mechanic that doesn't disorient you, and it's very satisfying. I talked about that in a before you buy, but this game has a lot of options for movement. I've been playing VR long enough now where I can essentially move around the world with two joysticks and not get sick, but that's tricky sometimes, and it's only if a game really implements it well that I don't throw up. And this is a good example of that. There's a lot of options if you want to try and get into it, but yeah, the combat's actually pretty cool, dude. And then it has actually like a Horizon feel to it where you walk up to the carcass of that animal and you pull out a component for it. I think they did a good job of actually translating some Horizon stuff to a VR game where it doesn't feel totally canned and totally cheesy. Again, like it does kind of pale in comparison to the experience of actual like a Horizon game, but where this game does have them beat is the sense of scale, the sense of size. Seeing a tall neck for the first time, seeing a lot of the machines for the first time is actually really awe-inspiring and a really good use case example for VR. These things feel big, and it's not always just in canned cutscenes where you're like feeling like you're on a ride. Like when you're actually facing off against these things in real time in gameplay, you get to actually still feel that sense of scale. And I think that's worth pointing out. Also, this isn't a spoiler or anything, I don't think, because apparently she was in the trailers, but like Aloy shows up a little bit in the game, and I was not ready for that. I was like, oh, hi, Aloy. How you doing? She's Aloy, so she's very like, oh, we have to do the mission. And she gets like right up in your face, and the graphics are really damn good. Also, she's very short, and that's interesting. Like I know there's like also like VR scaling stuff, but like she is a literal shorty, which was interesting. But seeing her and just like seeing a lot of the Horizon stuff was cool in VR. It kept me busy, and I think you should check it out if like you're a big Sony AAA first. Like, so I'll be the first to admit I am not the biggest Horizon guy. They're good. I just don't like, I'm not crazy about them. And I think if you are a diehard, if like you 100%ed Forbidden West or like either of them, give this a shot. Next up, there's a kind of a theme here with the PlayStation VR library having a lot of older stuff. Whether it's some PlayStation VR games that were thankfully updated for PlayStation VR2, because not all of them were, or they're just games that have been out on Quest or whatever platform. But still, I hopped into them here, and it's still a good reason to talk about them. So, dude, I've never gone on record about Tetris Effect. I don't think really at all. And in VR, it's crazy. It's absolutely awesome. Tetris Effect is the perfect Tetris game in a lot of ways. It's challenging. It's thoughtfully designed. It's absolutely beautiful. It's got incredible music, but it's just as addictive as Tetris has been from the very goddamn beginning. And being in VR with that and like choosing how close up you want to see the tiles and back up, and as you succeed in Tetris VR, like visuals happen and it gets all crazy and trippy and weird. It's a lot. Like it makes me wish I did drugs, but also just a big hell yeah yes to playing Tetris Effect in VR if you haven't, and also just play Tetris Effect if you haven't. Give it a shot. It's, for me, the definitive Tetris experience for forever now. Keeping with that theme, Tentacular is really cool. This is an older one as well, but it's an indie experience. It's published by Devolver Digital, but it's a super small, quaint experience. And that, over the years, is actually where I found the most innovation and fun and quirkiness with VR. With a lot of experiences, this is a really good example of it, and I'm glad it's on PSVR 2 now. Essentially, you play as a sea monster with two big, like, gross octopus tentacles for an arm, and you're kind of going through life. There's these little diorama towns with all these cute little people that like just talk to you like you're normal, but like, you have a little something different with you, and you're going through life and you're kind of like solving puzzles, doing weird tasks, and it's just kind of really good from start to finish, where it's just thoughtfully laid out. It's creative and fun consistently with all the things you could do with your weird tentacles and the game world's physics, but also the writing and the charm and the vibe. All of it is just like very, very nice to experience. It's not like this dark and gritty or brutal, fast-paced VR experience. It's a little bit more slow-paced, definitely feeling like a quirky indie game, but in a way that really works. And it's just really polished. It's super sharp. It's not very glitchy. It's nice to look at. And I don't think it's been getting enough love. I saw a lot of like PlayStation VR 2 reviews go out, and this is actually one of the featured games on the PSVR store, so I bought it, and I'm glad I did. Now, I said this in the before you buy, but it is really nice how like PlayStation VR will essentially give you new ways to play games you already own, whether it's No Man's Sky, which I haven't really been able to experience much yet, or Resident Evil Village, which I put some time into, and holy shit, I actually think this makes the game better. Now, I was a big fan of Resident Evil 7 in VR. I powered through that. This is more intensive and challenging. And wow, I'm still in the early stages of this one, but it just plays and feels great. It's a little awkward here and there with certain things with Ethan, where like it technically would be a cutscene of him reaching down and doing something. There's little awkward scaling things here and there, but this is one that has a really good sense of presence and sense of place, where like the interiors, the castle, but also like the actual gross village and the surrounding areas are just really well realized already. But seeing them in VR just shows how damn good of a job they did. It is so cool to walk around these places. And now with like the graphics not really being compromised, with like you really actually getting to see and experience most of it, it's impressive as hell. But it is challenging. It like almost makes it more like where Resident Evil Village was a little more action focused. It almost feels like it's once again like way more survival horror-y, because I was stressing and shitting my pants over every single bullet I had. I think it's because like I'm not a good shot in certain games, this one in particular, but oh boy, like it made that opening like stressful scenario where they're all coming at you until a cutscene triggers 10 times harder. But you have full movement, full capability as Ethan Winters. Like you can take a knife out of your sleeve, which is cool, and use that. You draw your guns. You actually have to manually reload, which makes it kind of anxiety inducing when an enemy's coming at you and you're like, oh, no, and you screw up the reload. To actually the healing yourself, you pop the healing potion, dump it on your arm. It's really well done, really stressful, but again, it's that stuff, the stress, the anxiety, the good darkness to it. Like the darks are really dark, so it feels darker and scarier. I apologize if my footage, like it's just really dark. Plus, it also plays it very safe with how it kind of applies horse blinders when you're moving a little bit on the sides, like an effect to not make you sick. There's a lot to it, but for me, it was also the sense of scale from the big mommy, the big lady. Oh my God, seeing her. Okay, like everybody's made jokes at this point, but let me tell you, VR is good for something. No, but in all seriousness, even just like the first time you see the castle, when you come over that cliff, it is a massive holy shit moment. You see the village down below you in the valley, you see the castle, and you feel it, man. Like it's a really good use case for like experiencing something massive that some people created. Now, jumping over to another one is Pistol Whip. This is another one that's an actual original PlayStation VR game that thankfully is one that was updated to support PlayStation VR2. And it's a relatively simple game, but it's a damn good one. And it's just me taking an excuse in this video to talk about a dope VR game. You probably at least have one friend, or you've watched a content creator that has spoke to the high heavens about Beat Saber, right? Beat Saber is absolutely incredible. We all know that by now. The rhythm-based VR game where you're hitting stuff to the beat, kind of like with like little lightsabers, and it's incredibly addictive. It uses licensed songs. It's amazing. It's cool. It can be exercise almost. Now, Pistol Whip VR essentially is like Beat Saber, but like John Wick. I think that's a pretty good pitch. There's a lot to it. There's a lot of different modes and there's a lot of customization to it. But the main gist of it is essentially you're kind of on rails going through levels and you're dodging bullets and shooting dudes. And it can be kind of rhythmic. It has a good vibe to it. It's intense. It's challenging. It's got a light gun style reload where you just point down and reload. So that came back for me instantly. I love light gun games. Time Crisis is one of my favorite things ever. So the pow 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 ching to reload, pow 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 ching to reload. Like it's just, it comes right back. But with that, you're also dodging bullets, kind of like super hot style, and it is so addictive and so cool. And also you will be covered in sweat by the end of it. Or me, just because I have some sort of cardiovascular breathing issue. I just kind of hold my breath all the time. It's not good. I can't help it, but this game is nothing short of incredible. It's available on pretty much every platform, as are most of the things I'm talking about here. So if you just have a Quest or something like that, or I don't know, whatever you're working with, Pistol Whip is the freaking thing. Like, I just like this a lot. There are a lot of VR games where you're, wow, cool, I'm shooting bad guys, but there's something about this one that really makes it extra awesome. Then last but not least, Gran Turismo 7. Now, I highlighted this one on the before you buy because it's important. This one, I felt strongly really about racing in VR from the beginning. Even if you don't have a steering wheel, obviously it's better with the whole 9 yards, but just experiencing racing in VR, seeing a lot of people experience it with PlayStation VR2 for the first time has been so exciting, because I do think it is the big thing for VR. It's really underrated. I experienced it first with the Oculus Rift, I believe, plugged into my computer for Dirt Rally in VR. I'm pretty sure was my first experience. And I was like one race in and I was like, holy shit, this is incredible. This is a really good use case for VR, like translating over to a regular game, because it heightens the game in every way. In a racing game in VR, you feel like you're in the vehicle. When you turn, you lean, you look one way, you're using your mirrors, you're aware of the other drivers around you. It is really perfect. The sense of speed is really good, and this applies all to Gran Turismo 7. It feels fast, it feels cool, the graphics are good enough where you can see the details of the interiors, your mirrors, you're constantly looking around as you're racing, and I love that. I know a lot of people like to expose like older people or adults to casual experiences in VR. Like, oh, I put my headset on Grandpa for the first time and made him play this stupid baby game. I think anybody who knows how to drive, just put them in like a racing game and let them go nuts. I think that's a really good way to sell people on VR. Obviously, I'm a huge DeLorean fanboy, so I love being able to check out the ins and outs of the car. And it's got a viewer mode, so I was like checking out Porsches. I was checking out like all these sick whips in VR in like a cool environment that you can customize to just look them on the ins and outs. And I checked out some cars I've seen in real life, like the DeLorean, and the sense of scale and like it just shows how insane Polyphony Digital really is. They are obsessive about how they model the cars and stuff, and it really shows when you get to actually walk up and look at one. And honestly, VR really saves Gran Turismo 7 for me, because I played it and I thought it was cool. I play them all and I go, okay, you know, it's whatever. They're very simple. They're very workman-like games. Not a lot of flash, not a lot of style. It's all about the hardcore sim racing, and that's fine. Then Gran Turismo 7 had a lot of microtransaction stuff, and so it made a lot of mistakes, and I just went, okay, you know, whatever. But VR absolutely makes it a better game. And if you already owned it and maybe you bounced off of it after a while, coming into it in VR gives it a whole new breath of life, let me tell you. PlayStation VR 2 has an uphill battle. I still want to see more of like what's coming in the future, how much Sony is going to actually back and support some of that development, how much of it is going to be ports. Either way, I think it could really use for some more killer apps, and I'd love to see more freedom across everything. I want to see Vader immortal on all platforms and not just locked to Meta. I'd like to very much see Half-Life Alyx on this, because it's the best game ever. And Valve doesn't always, you know, they used to not really play console warrior or like exclusive stuff, but we'll have to wait and see. I mean, at the very least, it seems like we're going to be able to, they announced we're going to be able to play at some point the new Resident Evil 4 in VR, and that is going to be a hell of an experience if Village is any indication of that. But I've talked enough about VR. Thank you if you did stop by here. I know, again, not a lot of interest in VR, but like, I just wanted to yap today, and it's what I've been spending time with, so I figured why not. So let me know what you think about anything VR, any of your experiences in VR, whether or not you throw up. Let's talk about VR. Thank you for being here. You know the drill. I'm Jake Baldino. Subscribe because video games, pizza's on me.